So normally I deal with cars, but I figured that many car enthusiasts might like helicopters too, so here I am having a trial lesson. This video is designed to give you a close look at how helicopters fly and help you prepare for your own trial flight, which is something I really highly recommend. Now for context, I used to fly light aircraft including aerobatics and instructing gliders, and being a nerd I've also read up on helicopter aerodynamics, so all of that gives me a bit of an advantage. Now of course there's not enough time for lots of detail, so experts, please forgive the simplifications, and for the rest of you, I hope you get to see something of what was truly a memorable experience.
Starting off with the collective, guys, as the name says, collective, it actually changes. As I raise the collective, it changes the pitch of all the blades collectively. Same amount, same time. Increasing the lift of each blade, and as such increasing the rotor thrust, and as a result the helicopter will start to climb. The opposite effect as well, you lower the collective, you decrease the pitch collectively on all the blades together, and the helicopter will descend. At the end of the collective that we just discussed, we got this little bit here, which is called the throttle. It's very similar to an accelerator. You open the throttle, in this case away from you. It actually allows more fuel and air into the engine, and you increase the power, and as a result you increase the rotor RPM, and the machine will either go faster or will go up and climb. As such, you close the throttle by merely winding it back towards you. You reduce the amount of fuel and air into the engine, reducing the power, and your rotor RPM will start to decay. So the one that most students struggle with in the beginning is the cyclic, held in the right hand, different shapes, but the cyclic is the device with which you control, the pilot controls the main rotor. You push the cyclic forwards, the entire disc tilts forwards. As such, your total thrust tilts forward, and the machine will start to fly forwards. If you were in a hover, or if you were already in flight, in forward flight at this, you will actually increase your airspeed. The opposite is true as well. You pull the cyclic aft, the nose will pitch up, or nose up attitude. You'll slow down by redirecting that thrust that initially was forward. You slow down by reversing the thrust backwards. Depending how fast you do it as a pilot, you either go forward fast and or slow down and or even fly backwards. Yes, that's correct. In certain ways, helicopters can fly backwards. Put it back in neutral. The cyclic also controls our lateral directional control. Cyclic left, the disc will tilt left, and as such the machine will start turning left. Opposite will right, and you can make a combined input. It's a misconception that people think you first have to apply forward and then left. That is not true. You can actually put inputs through the entire cycle, and hence its name cyclic. Alright guys, so normally during flight, during hover and so on, you would always have 2 feet. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'll only use my right foot. So the pilot has got yaw control, which is really the nose out either left and or right by the pressing either of the pedals. In this example, I'm going to push a right pedal back at the tail rotor, which we'll show you in a moment. The tail rotor will change pitch in such a way that it allows the nose to yaw to the right. I'll let go. This is certain pre-force active. I'm going to swap legs now here, and left pedal comes forward, and the nose will yaw to the left. It's a very sensitive control, and as such you only need a little bits at the time to correct the yaw. Yeah, well, what you compare to a car, we got a couple of additional instruments here, starting off with the airspeed indicator, which is literally translated to our forward motion through the air in knots, up to 94 knots in this machine. The red line for us is not something that you're getting speed tickets, but it's actually the speed never to exceed, in which very unwanted effects could happen.
The VNE.
Yep.
Velocity never exceed.
Alrighty, the next one down, altimeter, usually calibrated with a little dial over here. There's a subscale towards sea level, pressure at sea level. So it indicates hundreds, and the little one thousands of feet above mean sea level. Then we have a vertical speed indicator, so that gives us an indication of like how fast we are climbing. Okay, out here, the next row down on the left, we got the gauge, the tachometer, that gives us information about the outer scale, the engine RPM, and on the inner scale, probably most important for a helicopter pilot, the rotor RPM, and I'm talking about the main rotor. The engine, you know, yes, we got to look after the engine. It's very important, as all of you know, but the rotor RPM is what keeps us alive. If that gets below the red line over here, it's over for us. So whatever we do, once we're off the ground, we got to keep that in the green at all times. Manifold pressure is a matter of the matter that goes into the engine, the fuel and the air combined. You increase the power, the needle will increase its reading. Now some people say like, well, you know, I haven't got the start of the engine yet, so it's pointing at 30 inches, which is actually the static ambient pressure around us, 29.92 roughly of inches of manifold. And that's about it. Then we got a couple of gauges over here that gives you like the quantity of fuel, the fuel pressure, cylinder head temperature, oil temperature, and then a couple of switches. Now, starting a machine like this, even though it's a basic helicopter, is not as easy as you push a button nowadays or you just flick a switch. This is not the starter switch that a lot of students think. To start it, you have to operate a battery. This is actually the magnetos. We got two systems because it's crucial to the safety.
What's a magneto?
Okay, so the magneto is a device that's actually mounted, attached to the engine. And it's running synchronized on the engine, and it creates a high voltage spark in the combustion chamber. So as a result, fuel and air gets compressed at the right timing. The magneto, it will deliver a spark, and then boom, sets the whole lot on fire, and we have our combustion. So we have two systems in normal flight to both. Okay, for redundancy, we have a right and left to bring us home. Now you could say, all right, we need more than just a spark. We need something to burn, to set on fire, which is the mixture control out of here, this big red push button. Once the engine is running, okay, we're not going to touch it, but this is actually the cut-off position, so no fuel runs into, flows into the engine.
So maximum lean?
Yes, so literally this is cut off. There's no fuel.
Roughly equivalent to a choke on older cars, but now it's all done electronically.
Yeah, but keep in mind that when you pulled it all the way out like it is now, there is absolutely zero fuel running through, normally that is, into the engine. So in fixed wing, because you have a different dynamic, they leave it mixed or rich. So this is how we start it, but then they start to lean it. As they climb out, the air becomes less dense, they lean it. But in a helicopter, because we haven't got that propeller up to the front, if our engine stalls, it's very unlikely that low to the ground we can restart it again. So we never apply, in this model, we never apply a mixture lean. And then, yes, you got power, so the engine is running, okay? Just like a normal car. If you have a manual car, you need a clutch to transfer that power from the engine up to the transmission, which in our case is all done electronically. All we have to do is flick this little switch here all the way up, and it will actually engage. Now, the way it does that...
Okay, so that engages the engine to the rotor blades. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So what that does in the back, we can go over that in a moment. Here we have two pulleys. The bottom pulley is connected to the drive shaft, rotates at about 1500 RPM during startup. Okay, you engage the clutch. It actually starts to tighten the belts in between the two systems. As the belts tighten, this one rotates at engine speed. Okay, that one starts to grab now as well, and as a result you get drive power transferred from the engine via the belts to the main transmission. And we'll have a look in the back in a moment.
Great. So here's the drive belt pulley system. So the white shaft here, is that connected to the engine?
Correct.
Okay, so that's to the engine. And so at the moment that would just be kind of rotating freely, and then you've got a tensioner. Okay, and then that tensioner will pull out. Okay, and then as that tension increases, then this would be connected to the rotors, or in tail shaft in this case, and then we get more and more drive there. So yeah, okay. And where's the drive to the main? Oh, okay, that's the drive to the main rotor as well as.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct. So
Okay.
this, I'm just on the tail rotor drive shaft.
Yeah.
This will actually start rotating.
Yeah.
Via the belts. Okay.
Yeah.
This starts rotating, connected backwards towards the shaft, the tail rotor.
All right, let's have a
All
look
the
at
way
that.
there.
So there's that shaft,
Yep.
and that goes all the way to the end through here,
Correct.
and then there'd be a couple of
Yeah.
cogs at the end there.
Yep. So you got the gearbox to
And-
change the ratio.
Okay,
and
gearbox
also to
changes the
change
ratio,
the
yeah.
direction of
Yep,
rotation. And
yep,
as a
makes
result,
sense.
the
Yep.
entire unit starts
Yep.
to rotate.
And we got a tail skid here, just in case you
Yeah.
come down. You obviously want to bang
Exactly.
that, as opposed to banging the tail rotor, which would be not ideal for flying.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, and this is a small fin just to aid in
Yep.
directional stability at speed.
Correct.
Okay, that's really cool. Well, there you go. That's yeah. You'd want to take good care of these belts, and I would imagine that's why there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, as opposed to just one big one. Because if one fails,
Yep.
you've got 7 going. So yeah.
So the helicopter's an aircraft, and that means we've got way higher safety standards than with a car or a truck or anything terrestrial. So you've got to do a complete safety check before you even open the doors and get in. That's a walk around check. Then once you're in and you go through the engine startup procedure, which is more complex than just turning a key, you've got to get the engine running, check various things within limits, and then you're ready to take off. So that takes quite a few minutes, and I've sped the video up. So all the checks have been completed and we're good to take off. Now the instructor's flying the aircraft, my hands and feet are on the controls and I'm following through, so I'm lightly touching the controls but not restricting his movement. This allows me to get a feel as to what sort of control movements are needed to control the aircraft. It's very common in all sorts of flying. So I'm airborne at the moment, and the instructor's just doing a final check. Now airborne, is everything looking good? We're only just off the ground at this point. Everything's looking okay, so we can continue flying, and it's just exciting to, you know, first time turning. So now he's making a turn to the right just to get us away from the landing pad, and we're going to taxi or air taxi out to the departure point. So we're hovering at the moment, and we're going to move forwards, but look that the cyclic isn't really moving. There's almost no difference between the movement required to get the aircraft moving forwards and the hover. It's almost like you just don't make one of the corrections. And again, moving to the left, we're actually probably yawing the aircraft as opposed to banking it, because at low speed it's more kind of a yawing movement as opposed to banking. And we're back into a hover again, and again no massive movements of the controls to bring it to a halt. Now we're going to leave the hover and accelerate and climb up to our cruise, and again you can see not a huge amount of movement needed, but the cyclic is moving a bit further forwards than what it used to, and we're really gaining some altitude now as well as speed. So I sped this up as it's one of the least interesting parts. Now we are flying out to a training area. We don't fly over built up areas, so if we need to do that, we actually transit along main roads. The training area is a large area where there's no houses. You can see the instructor's taken his hand off the collective now, not really needed once you're established in straight and level flight, and now we're over at the coast, so we turn left and follow that and get to the training area. Now I'm given complete control of the aircraft, and to do that I'll say I have control, and then the instructor will relax his hands and feet off the controls, or even take them off completely, and I'm flying it. So what I'm doing now is just using my fixed wing experience. So I'm looking well ahead to the horizon, and I've already noted where the nose of the aircraft is in relation to the horizon. I've just got to keep it there with very small control movements. So I'm not worrying about the collective so much, it's really just cyclic, and that's keeping the aircraft steady in pitch and roll, and to be honest this is quite easy for an ex-fixed wing pilot. I know it's going to get more difficult later on. So enough straight and level flight, we're going to make a left turn, so look to the left, then back to the horizon, and just a fractional bit of left pressure on the cyclic and the aircraft banks, and we make a turn very similar to a fixed wing aircraft, and just as in a fixed wing, just a little bit of back pressure on the cyclic just to stop the nose dropping. Now because the aircraft is banked, we then need more lift, which means more drag, we need more throttle. Now in a fixed wing aircraft that's pretty easy, just increase the throttle, but of course in a helicopter it's more complicated. You've got to bring the collective up just a little bit, and that's got all sorts of further effects you've got to deal with. That just the joys of flying a helicopter. So the turns were just a bit of a warm-up, because now things are going to get difficult, and that's because I'm going to slow the helicopter down, and the slower you fly a helicopter, I've discovered, the harder it is to fly. So to do that, we're just going to reduce the collective a bit and bring the cyclic back just a fraction, and of course that's going to mean changes with the rudder pedal, and because that fin on the back isn't as effective now we've slowed down, I'm going to have to work a bit more with the rudder pedals as well. And also as we slow down, the helicopter starts basically flying within its own downdraft, and that means the rotor blades aren't as efficient, so I'm going to need to increase the collective a bit once I start to slow down, and it's all just one thing changes another thing, but it's pretty cool just to bring the aircraft back and then be, well, pretty much almost come to a hover, as you'll see. Okay, so the airspeed's been brought right back. We're doing about 15 knots, which is nautical miles per hour, translates through to about 30 kilometers per hour, and the aircraft feels very different at this point. A fixed wing aircraft with controls would feel really sloppy, but the helicopter is still really responsive, but it gets more responsive really the slower you go. Now I'm going to do a turn here to the right, and the interesting thing about that is it's a bit like a race car. The slower you go for the same amount of bank angle or turning force, the quicker you turn. So we're turning way quicker now than we did at speed, which kind of stands to reason when you think about it. And now we're heading directly into wind, and then here's an interesting point you don't get to on the ground. So we're heading into wind with maybe 15 knots of airspeed, but the wind is coming towards us at 15 knots, so our speed over the ground is pretty much zero. So we are hovering relative to the ground, but we're flying forwards into the wind. The nearest analogy to that in cars is doing a river crossing in a four-wheel drive, when you can be stationary in a river, but the water's coming towards you, so you've got some effective water speed over the vehicle. And going around again to the left, and yeah, it feels really cool just to do these low speed sort of almost hovery turn things. Actually, another car analogy is heading into a headwind. So let's say you're towing a heavy trailer, you know what your fuel consumption is, but then you get onto this stretcher highway, you've got a headwind that's going to shoot right up, because the airflow over your car is the speed of the car plus the speed of the wind combined, whereas if you've got a tailwind, you're going to get the airflow of your car, which is speed of the car minus the wind speed, so much less. So that combines to give us really a nil speed in the helicopter over the ground. Okay, so now we're going to try and accelerate, so I'm going to dip the nose, as you can see, and that means we're going to have to bring the collective up, and that means we're going to have to go with the rudder pedals, because everything's all connected. Can't say this often enough, just move one thing, everything else has to move, and we start to pick up a bit of speed again, and the aircraft starts to feel a little bit less skittish. We're still not going super fast, but yeah, just dipping that nose a bit. Not quite dipping it enough there, so the instructor's saying, come on, get the nose down a bit. Compared to a fixed wing aircraft, the nose attitude is quite low, so you kind of got to reorient what you know about fixed wing when you're flying a helicopter in many different ways. So we're heading back to the airport now. Remember, we can't overfly built up areas, so what we have to do is actually follow the main road, because in the event of an engine failure, the helicopter can in fact, well, glide is probably the wrong word. It doesn't fall out of the sky, but it doesn't glide in the same way that a fixed wing aircraft would glide or paper aircraft would glide. So we've got to follow this road here. Now, if you look at it, I'm not actually pointing straight along the road, and the reason for that is we've got a crosswind, so I've got to compensate for that by moving the nose out to the left, and that tracks us, as you can see, along that main road. So in the event of an engine failure, then the people driving along that road are going to get a bit of a surprise. Okay, now we need to go to the right, so guess what, we're actually going to turn to the right, pretty much above this road junction here, I did crack an extraordinarily funny joke about waiting for the lights to turn green, which really not sure my instructor fully appreciated the deep and majestic humour of that remark. But anyway, here we are heading down the freeway, and again, just in case the engine fails, it gives us somewhere to put the aircraft. And then once we're past this set of houses, we're going to head out to the left towards the sewage plants, because obviously that's a great place to put an aircraft down in the event of an engine failure. So we've rejoined the circuit at the airfield, we've turned downwind. I'm still flying the aircraft, the instructor's got his hands ready to take control. I'm just pointing where I've been told to point. I'm not quite sure what I'm aiming at, but eventually it comes into view. There's a tiny little H, and that's what we're aiming at. So my aim here is to slow the aircraft down and reduce altitude at the same time, and come to some form of vague hovering thing over that H which he's pointing to at the moment. So we'll see how I get on with that. Oh, this is really exciting. I do love this sort of, always love landings in aircraft, and this is kind of an approach to landing in a helicopter. So we're making our way to that H, which you can now see clearly just ahead of us there, and trying to get somewhere near it, but I don't really make that. So the instructor sort of takes over and says, all right, we'll just get us that nice little bit there. So this is how helicopters should be flown, and we just arrive over the H, and then it's time for me to try and do some hovering. Okay, so this is my attempts to hover. Well, actually, I'm not hovering, the helicopter's hovering. I am controlling the helicopter in a sort of hover, to be precise. As you can see, it's not overly steady, but we're not upside down. That's something, and the instructor hasn't booted me out of the aircraft. Now, this is really hard. The nearest analogy I can get to in car terms is holding a drift. In as much that in a drift you've kind of got your throttle and you've got your steering, and you've got to be really sensitive as to which way the car's rotating and adjust throttle and steering to keep it going. Well, flying a helicopter is like that, but imagine that you've also got to keep the drifting car in a vertical dimension as well. It's just really, really hard. Drifting's way easier. Hovering is also like backing a trailer, because when you do that you put a control input on and there's not necessarily an instant effect, and obviously there's a further effect as well. So there you go, hovering is like drifting a trailer backwards. Okay, I've hardly mastered hovering, but you know, we're vaguely in the same place. I'm just going to try going forwards a little bit and backwards. So to do that, just a bit of gentle pressure on the cyclic to go forwards, as you can see over here. And of course that means changes with the collective and the rudders. And then I go, all right, well, that's gone forwards. And then I thought, okay, let's try and fly a helicopter backwards. And that's pretty exciting. So here we go. And into a hover-ish, my version of a hover, we just pull the cyclic back just a fraction, and again we just wait, you know, it's not instant, and then look, we're going backwards. I'm flying a helicopter backwards. This is one of the greatest days of my life. It's just awesome. Okay, now I'm going to try a turn whilst hovering, which is really difficult because part way around the turn the wind is pushing you, then it's against you, and that means you've got to change the amount of rudder which you've got, and of course you change the amount of rudder, then that means also changes with the throttle as well, and with the collective, And then also you've basically got to keep the rotor blade tilted into wind as you rotate around it. So you've got to change the cyclic. So doing a turn in a helicopter whilst hovering is yet, and I keep saying it's difficult, right? Trust me, it's difficult. This is really hard to do, and yeah, I guess that's what makes it so interesting and rewarding. A bit like driving a manual sports car on a track. To me, that's much more exciting and rewarding than driving an automatic sports car. Okay, that left turn was not super good, so we haven't had a crack at it. So I'm not exactly perfectly hovering, but well, look, I'm within the same square kilometres, so that's something. So looking out to the left and just trying to get that nose round, but not too much. I'm more going sideways here as opposed to turning, so a bit more rudder. But then as the wind starts to come round, then I need to slow the rudder down. So it's just that constant coordination. Here we go, and then the wind's starting to push me around here, so I don't want to overdo that. And the instructor just getting his hand ready just in case we crash. And there we go, 360 completed. So the instructor just said, do you want to have a go at landing? And I thought, okay, well that was a bit unexpected, but as an instructor I certainly wouldn't tell any student to do something I didn't think they were capable of. So yeah, let's give it a shot. So the first thing he said is, all right, let's get it pointed into wind, which means a bit of a right turn, because that's obviously going to be easier to deal with. So sort of turn it round 45 degrees-ish and get vaguely pointed into wind, which is what we've done now. Now I then need to establish a hover and then just slowly bring that collective down. I'm looking well ahead here. I'm really conscious not over controlling, because the closer you are to the ground, the more the ground seems to move. 1,000 feet up, it doesn't seem that much. And I'm just looking ahead now, and you can see with this that was a mistake, but just bring it back. Don't want to over control here, don't want to get excited. I'm still keeping it pointed pretty much into wind, just down and down and down, and out of the corner of my eyes now I can sort of see the grass move. I know we're getting closer, but I'm just still looking ahead and just thinking, okay, when's the ground going to come up? I'm just letting it down, and just gone up just a fraction. That wasn't really me. I didn't increase the collective, it just gusted up. I wasn't quick enough to react. But I've got no rush for this at all. No rush for it. I really want to get this right. And then we're down. And to be honest, that was actually a surprise to me. That was actually a shock that we were, not really a shock, but I didn't realise we were going to quite touch down. But we're down, and I landed a helicopter, and yeah, the day just got even better. Okay, I've had a couple of demo takeoffs. It's my turn. I'm just gently bringing the throttle up, and also the collective. You can see that the aircraft is starting to get light now, and then it's just starting to get into the air, and immediately you're sort of into flying and correcting it. So we're now back into what I fondly refer to as a hover, but is in fact a series of semicircles, reasonably resembling a hover if you look from a long distance away. Now you're going to see how helicopters should be flown as the lesson is over and the instructor is taking the Hughes 300 back to its helipad. So overall, I would definitely say that a gift of this nature, trial flight, would be something that anyone who's into car tech or racing cars, four-wheel drive, would definitely appreciate. It is a fascinating machine to operate and even be in and just experience, so definitely look at that for a trial flight. So I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments, and thank you for watching. And finally, just enjoy this precision landing.